So good morning again. Buddha. Again, so today we are going over, as I mentioned earlier, mantra or chanting meditation, which is a fun form or practice, I think. It is a favorite among many. So hopefully it does benefit you today as well. Here, obviously we're a Buddhist temple, so we use Buddhist terms or terminology to do the chants or mantras, but a mantra does not have to be religious or spiritual in any shape or form. There's no power in the word itself, right? So when we do mantra meditation, the whole point of it is just to give you another object of concentration or another object of meditation, right? So throughout the classes we've taught or we've discussed different forms of meditation, different practices, different techniques you can do with your breathing, with walking, with mindfulness, and so forth. So mantra, or chanting in general, is another form of meditation that you can do. So usually with mantra, you are probably, everyone's familiar with this Om, right? Om, Om, Om. Or some use the 3 syllables, the Om, Ah, Hum. Today we'll use Amitabha. It's short, it's easy, and it kind of flows better, especially when we get to the later part of the practice. But again, the whole point of meditation in general is concentration, right? You want to develop your concentration. We want to try to slow our minds a little bit. We want to try to control the thoughts, control what comes up and how we react to them, right? So in meditation, I think one of the most misconceptions is that we want to have a clear mind, that we have no thinking whatsoever, which is untrue. That's not really the point, right? That may be the end goal in years to come, but for right now, you can do all the thinking you want. The problem is that when we do think, we tend to entertain those thoughts. We tend to interact with them heavily, right? We have these imaginary scenarios or these, just crazy dreams, or we're just entertaining the thought. And that's not what we're supposed to do. What we should be doing is when a thought does arise or when a distraction arises, right, is that we simply just acknowledge it, label it, and just let it move on. It will naturally disappear on its own, right? So now we hear the dogs because they're very close by. So when we're meditating, we hear the dog. All you should be doing is just acknowledging the dog's barking. So you can either say dog or bark or sound, or whatever you want to use. Try to use one word to describe what you're hearing or feeling, and then just acknowledge it and kind of let it pass because it'll naturally disappear on its own. So whether you're feeling things, right, if you're feeling discomfort or you're feeling hungry or thirsty, right, just give a quick one-word label and try to go back to your meditation object. Now, what's really good about the mantra part, or mantra or chanting meditation, is it's a constant reminder, right? Because we're chanting it, you're doing it over and over again, right? There's little room for distraction, which is why it's a favorite among many, because you're saying something, you're doing something, constantly, that there's really little room for distraction. Versus when we're meditating on our breath, or if we're doing walking meditation or mindfulness meditation, right? Yes, you're focusing on your breath or the movement of your feet, but there's lots of room for distraction because it's quiet, right? You're just mentally noting, or you're mentally saying things to yourself. So there's room for distraction, for thoughts to come up. Versus when we're just chanting or doing the recitation, you're focusing so much on what you're saying that hopefully there's little room for distraction or for things to come up. So in the beginning, when we do it slowly, that's probably, in my experience, the only time where distractions may arise. Because we are doing it slowly, we are walking slowly, we're going to be sitting and doing the recitation pretty slowly. So for me, that was the only time of where I would notice distractions coming up. But as we recite faster and quicker, it'll fast. But I'm also mindful of everyone else in the room. So if I can kind of tell that it's hard for people to keep up, then I'll stop going faster and just kind of slow down at that point. But since we're just doing one phrase of Amitabha, it'll be hopefully much easier for everyone to just kind of stay focused and and keep up. What's also a good thing about this, it's also a form of rapid breathing, right? Breathing techniques is something I'm hesitant to speak about in a class, so it's still on my maybe to-do list. But if I go over it, rapid breathing or fire breath is a form of meditation where you're kind of breathing heavily very quickly for a certain amount of time, and then you stop, you hold your breath, and then you repeat it. Because after that session, your breath is going to be very steady and very calm and very shallow, which is the natural way of our body breathes, right? When we're sleeping, our body is breathing very shallow, very steady, and that's way more natural than anything else throughout the day. Because when we're talking, we're also our breath is unnatural. When we're breathing, when we're talking, when we're walking, when we're doing something, right? We're constantly restructuring our breath, or we're taking in deep breaths or whatnot. So it's not very natural. So when we sit or when we sleep, and we focus for a certain amount of time, our breath starts becoming more steady and more shallow. So after we do the mantra and we fully stop, you'll notice that your breath is very shallow. It's very steady. It feels good. You may feel some tingling in your body or in your face, as long as you're keeping up with the mantra, which also helps in the meditation as well, because then your whole body will feel kind of vibrating a little bit, which is nice for me. So hopefully everyone experiences that. Everyone is going to experience different things. Some only feel things in their face, or in their mouth, or in the body. But do pay attention to that, right? When we stop, we'll sit. The whole session will be up to 30 minutes. So whatever time we have left after we're done the mantra part, we'll sit for that amount of time. So for that amount of time, just concentrate on your breathing, on your breath, on your body. Feel the sensations in the body. If you have any tingling, if you have any kind of just weird sensations that you don't typically feel when you're sitting, pay attention to those, right? And then just enjoy the slow breath, because that's ultimately what we want in the end. So that's that. Hopefully everyone will enjoy it as much as I do and others do. Do we have any questions before we get started? We'll have some time afterward to kind of discuss and see how everyone felt and experienced it. Again, what we'll be doing is Amitabha. So we'll do the walking, as I mentioned, first. Try to take each step with each syllable. So it's Amitabha, right? So each syllable takes a step. And then when we sit, we'll continue the slowness for a little bit. And then again, after every ring of the bell, we'll pick up. After about 5 times or so of speeding up, I'll ring the bell and we'll kind of slow down until we come to a complete stop. And at that point, we'll just sit and meditate. And afterwards, we can chit-chat about our experience, hopefully. Okay. Okay, last chance for any questions first.
Is there like any proper place that we should be taking a breath, like after the?
No. Once you sit, you just sit. Just sit and just breathe. You want to naturally breathe. At this point, you can focus on your breath if you want, but which is probably you should do anyway, right? But because after chanting after chanting and stopping, usually, and everyone experiences differently again, you'll feel that tingling in your body, or kind of just a buzzing feel, kind of, right? And usually people would want to focus on that. So just kind of enjoy the feeling. If you don't experience that, then you want to go back and pay attention to your breath, right? So when you're breathing, you can notate it, as we mentioned, right? You can notate either in or out, or up and down for your abdomen, right? Or just count your breaths. So for every in and out breath, you count 1, every in and out, count 2, etc., up until 10. And then you want to reverse, go from 10 to 1. That's
How about during the chant?
During the chant, you're only focusing on saying the word. Amitabha. Right. That's your main focus. And then once you stop, then you can go back to your breath. Okay, good question. Anything else? Nope. Okay, good. So we'll go ahead and rise. And so I think first row will come out.
Amitabha, 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 Amitabha,
How was that? Did I go too fast? Sometimes I tend to go too fast. So I go up to 5 times. I'm pretty sure I went like, what, 8, 9 times? I'm sorry. I'm just in the zone, y'all.
You talk a little bit about, especially when it starts getting fast. So I found myself doing like 2 Amitabhas and catching really kind of thing. Is there any other thoughts on how to breathe during this exercise?
So what I typically do, which is if I were to have a class on breathing, one of the forms of breathing is pretty much just inhaling air into your abdomen and your chest. So instead of just taking a big breath and doing this goes in, this goes out, you're taking a big breath, so you're filling your stomach and you're filling your chest, so you have more air in your body, more oxygen to utilize.
You can get that breath in really quick.
Right. Right. So it's like Amitabha, Amitabha, Amitabha until you run out and you take it all out. Amitabha, 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 Amitabha. Go out, you're out. Amitabha, Amitabha, Amitabha. Like it takes practice, but
depending on the speed, like a couple of cycles of Amitabha, and then I can catch a quick breath.
right. Yeah, because most people like inhale, like right, they squeeze their stomach and they try to like fill up their lungs. You're getting less air like that. So if you fill your abdomen and you fill your chest, you have a whole chest full of air versus just the first part of it. Yeah. And that form of breathing, aside from the chanting, if you breathe that way, right, if you take in deep breaths like that, and then you're exhaling, you're pushing everything out, and you're taking the deep breaths like that and pushing everything out, that's a form of, that's a simplified form of breathing in the cold, is what I like to call it, right? So for me, the reason I enjoy meditating in the cold is because I can handle it. I know what to do to keep my body warm in order to withstand the cold. So that's a simplified version of a breathing technique that allows your body to start kind of generating necessary heat. The actual form is called vase breathing, where you're like pushing all the air down into your abdomen and creating heat there. But the big exhale and the big inhale, for me at least, helps when I'm doing fast chants. And you can, since you're filling up everything, it's pretty easy to kind of do a quick inhale, I think, or maybe I'm just used to it. I don't know. Is it quick for everybody else?
Yeah,
if you try it,
quicker than you think.
Right. Right.
But when you pull it from down here, especially when you're staying with the meter of the chant, I found it. At first, I was like, "Oh, that's not going to be enough air," but because your mind's always like,
right.
"What's happening to me?" Right? But it seemed to be, if you do it quickly and focus on the belly, you do replenish that oxygen
right.
very quickly.
Good question. Anything else? Any other questions, experiences you want to share? Versus or compared to some of the other forms that we've learned. That's right too.
I would think also, just one observation is, I would think the chanting would be the most powerful when we can all hear each other. So I'm not saying.
Yeah, when I was doing Joe keeping up, I was focusing on everybody else's.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's certainly not. It's not at all a criticism, because I found myself drifting off as well. But I think part of vocalization, especially in a group, is for each of our individual syllables to add together to a very powerful syllable. So
right.
Just something to think about next time you do that. Make the effort to vocalize a little bit louder.
Yeah, I zone out.
Like disoriented, like is it good to kind of like fall into the disoriented, or like try to keep on track with the vocalization of what you're doing?
What do you mean being disoriented? Like just
like the sounds of, like is disoriented, like the sounds of the room kind of like made the room feel like it's a different shape and like I'm like falling over kind of like.
Okay. During the walking part or the sitting part?
During the sitting, like kind of as it like picked up pace and it kind of got intense.
It happens. So it's part of because you're doing something your body's not used to doing, right? Especially when you start doing the deep breathing. So I do deep breathing. When I do deep breathing exercises, if I don't do it for a while, then I start feeling lightheaded and potentially like pass out, right? Winona has experience in passing out, so it has that feeling. It can happen, right? Because you're not used to doing it. It's okay. So right. So I always tell I tell Winona this all the time. Like if you're doing deep breathing and you feel like you're about to pass out, or you feel like something's about to go happen wrong, or something wrong's gonna happen, like just stop, right? Like don't force yourself to do something when you know something bad could potentially be happening, right? So if we're going too fast and you're starting to get dizzy or whatever, like you can stop, right? Like don't force yourself to continue. This is a learning experience, right? So even meditation itself, when you're sitting and you're in pain and you're aching, I tell people after a while, if you've been meditating for a while and you're still feeling pain, like you're gonna have to suck it up and go through it. Like just go with it, right? You'll eventually get used to it. Yes, it's gonna hurt, but you won't be able to overcome it if every time you feel pain and you kind of go back and your whole meditation session's done, right? So if you're only meditating for 10-15 minutes and you're only meditating for 10-15 minutes a day, over time that's not going to help you, right? Because it can take 10-15 minutes to actually get in a good state of mind to actually begin the real meditation session. So if you're in pain at first, if you're in pain, you can work through it, or if you can stop and try to like either adjust yourself or doing whatever, or if you're doing the chanting and you feel dizzy or lightheaded or something, like you can stop or slow down, right? Work with yourself. Your body knows what it needs, right? That's how that's how we breathe all the time. Our body knows we need to breathe. So even if we're like out of breath or whatever, like our body will take care of itself. So be mindful of how your body's feeling. Be mindful of what's going on. Especially in the beginning when you're doing something very new, right? It's going to be different. Your body needs to adjust. But after a while, especially if you do like deep breathing, after a while, your body, the reason why you're about to pass out is because you're putting in more oxygen in your body and you're exhaling more carbon dioxide. So your body's just like, what's going on here? This is not the normal amount of air we're taking in. So that's how we feel lightheaded or we feel like it's crazy tingling in your body. But after a while, it becomes a little bit more natural for itself and it kind of just self-adjusts. I can go much faster, but spare y'all the fastness. But it is something you just have to kind of practice with, right? When I recommend everyone to try mantra meditation, and you can literally use any word, right? I mentioned earlier that you don't have to use some sort of religious or spiritual word, right? You can literally just say car, or pay attention, right? Whatever it is, like a mantra is not holy in itself. There's no power to the word. The power is the concentration that it's going to give you when you meditate on it. So you can use anything, but like any other form of meditation object that we use, the mantra or the word is your point of contact, basically. So stick with it. Try different speeds. Especially when walking meditation, when we went over walking meditation in the class. For the sake of the group, whenever we did walking meditation, I told everyone to keep the same pace as me, basically, since I'm leading. Keep the same pace, that way when we end, everyone ends at the same time. But when you do walking meditation on your own, you can self-adjust your pace. So you can go faster, you can go slower, you can do whatever feels better for you or more comfortable for you, or what works for you, right? So it's the same thing with anything else. Anything you do, any sort of form of meditation or technique, you have to play with it a little bit. You have to do a little bit of experimenting. That's why I'm giving you all these different forms, right? because there's not one right form. There's not one right technique to meditate. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of ways to meditate. I'm only giving you a handful so you can experiment with each one and see what works for you best. That way when you go home or you go wherever, you have something that you can grasp onto and say, this is what works for me and this is what I'm going to start doing. So it's an experiment, basically. All these classes are just one giant experiment for you to play with and see what works. Cool. Anything else?
Maybe if you want walking meditation and you're not doing a mantra, what do you focus on?
Majority of the time you're focusing on your feet. You're being mindful of your steps, right? So you can do labeling. So when we're doing walk meditation, you can label right, left, or you can label lifting, placing, or lifting, shifting, placing, right? You can add however many steps you want to help the concentration. So walking meditation is not so much about the breath, it's more about the movement of your feet and just being mindful of your feet and the ground, right? If you're walking outside, you can be mindful of how the ground feels, right? If you're on grass, if you're on dirt, you're in rubble, whatever. But you're shifting your focus from breathing to pretty much your steps, to your feet. Or you can do breathing if you want. In my experience, it's a little bit tougher because your breath doesn't always, I guess you could. Your breath doesn't always align with your steps. You could make it align, right? But the problem was that if you make it align, that means you're controlling your breath, and you don't want to do that. The same thing when we're actually meditating on our breath, right? So the number one and most traditional technique is counting. So for every in and out breath is you count 1, in, out, 2, in, out, 3, up until 10, and you repeat. Or if you get distracted or if you lose count, you start back at 1. But one of the problems that I've heard from people with that is they tend to control their breathing, right? They're making themselves breathe so they can count. And you don't want to do that. And what typically happens is you're counting either before you breathe or right as you're breathing. And that, in my experience, I felt like I'm controlling the breath. So what you want to do when you're counting is after you've breathed is when you start counting. So you're breathing in, you're breathing out, and then you count, versus 1 in, and then you breathe in. Does that make sense? I'm rambling.
Why don't you want to control the breath?
Because it's not natural. It's not natural. The whole point of meditating on your breath is just to feel the natural rhythm that your breath and your body is making, right? So if you're breathing heavily, you want to be mindful that you're breathing heavily. If your breath is shallow, you want to be mindful and notate your breath is shallow. You want to notate what your body is naturally doing, right? The same thing when we're on the distractions. If you're thinking, right? It's very hard to stop our thinking completely, right? Like you can tell your brain to stop thinking all you want, but it's like a child. You tell it no, 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 and it wants it more and more and more. So instead of telling it no, 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 you can just acknowledge it and be like, okay, I know you're thinking, I know you want food, or I know you want coffee, but and not right now. I'm going to take that acknowledgement and just kind of continue. But after a while, things become easier, right? If you take a meditation method or technique, or if you're experimenting with different things and you find something that works for you best, you'll notice that you'll in a way reprogram your brain and mind, and it'll know that, okay, while I'm meditating, I know she or he doesn't want to be thinking so much. So after a while, your mind will start to settle on its own. Training a puppy or raising a child, right? It takes time, but it does take dedication. It does take discipline. Like if anybody knows me, you know that I'm all about the discipline, and meditation cannot be a hobby. You can't just come into it when you feel like it or when it's convenient for you. You have to make the time. Why no now? And and you have to be on a schedule. The easiest way to have that discipline is to have a schedule set for meditation. That was my biggest hurdle years ago when I would kind of go in and out of it, right? But if you have a set schedule, then it's easier because your mind will be like, okay, now it's time to meditate. Now it's time to focus, right? So whether you do it early in the morning before you go to work, or when you do it at night after you come back from work, or before you sleep, or in the middle of the day on your break or lunch, right? Whatever works for you. You have to, but as long as you have a set schedule and you tell yourself, I'm going to commit 10, 15, 20 minutes of meditation, you do it often enough, then you'll feel the benefits. You'll notice the benefits of meditation, and you'll want to do more of it. You'll want to meditate for longer periods of time. It's not going to happen overnight, obviously, but if you start small and just add to it, then you'll really start seeing the benefits. And benefits are going to be different for every person, right? Depending on what you're using it for, right? So for Buddhists or for monks and nuns, we use it to hone our concentration. Because concentration, and once we're able to concentrate on one thing with minimal distractions, then we can start doing contemplation. And we used contemplation in order to look deeper into teachings and discourses, and to really see its true meaning and all that good stuff. But for lay practitioners, you probably want to use it to just calm your mind a little bit, right? Our mind is constantly racing. So you may want to do it to help lessen that, to help prevent so much anxiety about regretting the past or thinking about the future, right? You want to try to be in the here and now, because we don't have the time machine to go back in the past, and we're not psychic, so we can't see the future. So why worry about it? Just focus on the here and now. Focus on what you do know and what you can control, and that'll hopefully help the anxiety that most of us have about just life, right? Okay, cool. Anything else?
I'm curious when you're focused on the beliefs, what you focus on.
There's different ways. So there's different ways to contemplate. So for me, if I'm doing contemplation on a teaching, for instance, right, like the Four Noble Truths, it's the most basic foundation teaching in Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths. So contemplation for me is dissecting the teaching. What is it? What does it say? First of all, what do others say about it? What is it? How do I feel about it? And then kind of break it down a little bit more and try to see exactly what it's trying to teach. There's a lot of parable and similes in Buddhism. There's not very often where it's clear cut, right? Besides the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, that was the teaching that Buddha told us, hey, do this, and then your life will be a little bit easier for you, right? But when you go into the actual teachings and the discourses and the sutras, it's a little bit more complicated, and it's not clear cut. There's a lot of storytelling, there's a lot of parables and just things that doesn't typically make sense. And there's a lot of terminology that won't make sense to unless you know Buddhism, right? Unless you know the terminology and you know what certain things lead to and what other things mean. That's what we typically contemplate on. Because, for instance, we chant the Lotus Sutra here, right? The Lotus Sutra. But if you read it for the first time, it's going to seem very mystical or metaphysical, or just literally a fairy tale almost, right? Because it just mentions like palaces and jewel towers made out of 7 different jewels, and mythical creatures, and ground that's gold, and trees that are made of diamonds and different gems, right? So the first time you're reading, you're like, this is literally a fairy tale. Like, how is this even a religion, right? But unless you know what a jewel tower represents, unless you know what the 7 jewels mean, unless you know what different little things mean, then the whole thing is just useless for you, right? So when you contemplate, you have to know the backstory in order to contemplate on the 7 jewels. The 7 jewels means the 7. 7 is a sacred number, right? In Buddhist cosmology. So 7 is like the 7 levels of enlightenment, right? So when you read about the 7 precious gems, the 7 forms of enlightenment or the 7 levels of enlightenment would come to mind. So you apply the 7 levels of enlightenment teachings into what they're trying to say about the 7 jewels. So it's things like that. It's not easy, but it's not difficult. But so when we're contemplating on a discourse like that or teaching like that, you have to utilize all the background info in order to really see what the story is trying to tell you. And eventually you'll get it, hopefully.
It's not really an intellectual understanding that we're after. It's almost like it's a layer of abstraction that's not truth. But through that, we can touch the truth by studying that, contemplating that. It feels like then out of the emptiness can come the true wisdom, which is not something we can describe or even talk about.
Right. Because back in the day, the Buddha was a pretty good teacher. And the way he taught was that he would analyze and assess his audience. So if he were in a small, poor village, he would teach his audience in a way that they would understand. If he was at a palace full of, high-ranking officials and people that are educated, then he would teach them a little bit higher level, right, that they would understand. So depending on his audience, he taught different ways, but with the same end goal, with the same conclusion, just in different forms. So that's why a lot of our discourses and our teachings, some are very abstract, and some are very mythical, and some are very simple, and some are very different forms, right? But ultimately, they all lead to the same goal. And so when we contemplate, we have to try to see that, just dissect all this fancy words and imagery and get to the true meaning of it.
Maybe a good analogy is like a school class. You go to school and you sit in the class, and the teacher lectures, and you have discussions, and you have all this information in your head that's never been there before. You leave class and you go somewhere and you sit down in the library quietly, and you start contemplating or reviewing and thinking about all this information. And that's where the synthesis comes. That's where the wisdom can arise. So there's like the intake of the information, the awareness, and then you contemplate on what arises in that awareness. It's kind of what it seems to me.
Yeah, I can go on and on and on and on and on about it because that's my life, obviously. But that's for another time. So I hope everyone enjoyed today's class. Our next one will be the 4th Saturday, whatever Saturday that is. 22nd. The 22nd we will do, I'm fairly sure we'll do visualization, which is one of the toughest. And I think that will conclude our first series. And then next month, March 14 TBD, we'll have our second retreat, half-day retreat. So keep an eye on that. I do encourage everyone to visit the website or Facebook group page to see all the updates. I did upload today's notes. So I've been very slacking lately on printing notes for y'all, but today's notes are on the website or on the Facebook group, so feel free to read those or download those. And then the 22nd is our next class, and hopefully the 14th will be our retreat. And I definitely encourage everyone to join us there. Okay, that's all I had. No last minute questions? No.
These notes you're talking about on your website?
On the website, yes. I just did it this morning or last night. I don't know. I usually print them out, but I ran out of ink for my printer. I just haven't been able to replenish yet, so I'm slacking on that. But they're on the website. All the notes from previous classes are on the website as well. And then of course on our YouTube channel, most of the previous classes are also uploaded as well. So if you want to review previous classes and previous techniques that we went over, that would be a good resource for you as well. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, thank you all. I'm gonna check in on you, but